Well, the question a year and a half ago is like, how are we going to attract users? How are we going to attract users? Oh my God, we have users. We have so many
Yeah.
users. How are we going to scale? How are we going to scale? Oh my God, we have scaling solutions. We have BSC. We have Polygon. We have, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Oh, how are we going to connect those together? Oh, we have bridges. And like, it happens really fast. And now it's always like, okay, we have this stuff. What are we going to do with it? I'm really curious to hear the story of Flourishing Capital and like where you guys came out. I'm going to get started with our little intro, and then we'll dive in to learn what is Flourishing Capital, how they use Chainlink, and everything else. Stick with us. We'll be right back in 2 seconds. Welcome to Chainlink Live. My name is Andy Blaine from Chainlink Labs. I'm here with Will from Flourishing Capital. Will, how you doing, man?
Doing great today.
I'm really excited to learn about Flourishing. If you were here before the jump, which wasn't that long ago, 2 seconds ago, you heard me say this. Tell me about Flourishing Capital. What is it? Like, what's your core? And let's just start with that.
So our mission was to build a portfolio manager for crypto. These things exist in equities, and they have for decades. Like you just put them in, an index fund or hedge fund or an ETF or something like that manages a basket of assets that are all risk adjusted, et cetera, for your particular preference. And it just runs with it, and you don't have to look at the market. We had this serious problem in crypto for the longest time where everybody was just day trading. Everybody was watching charts 24/7. Everybody was trying to put their own portfolio together and do their own research. And there was no cohesive system that brought it all together, that just you would put your money into and it would manage your portfolio in a sane and logical way. So we built that. And it's all based on AI. It's all automatic. It's a beautiful thing.
Cool. That tracks. Before the break, I was asking you, like, where did this come from? Like, how did you germinate the spark for this idea? What's sort of the era of crypto that this comes out of and really gets cohesive into, we're going to build this and launch it?
So there's a little history here. I was at NVIDIA, and this is about 2016, 2017. I guess around early 2017. CEO of NVIDIA sends out a letter to the employees saying, our GPUs are flying off the shelves. We don't really know why. It's not gamers. We need to form a team internally to look into this. Lo and behold, I end up on this team, right, to take a look at this. And we discover that it's actually all these miners. And at the time, they're primarily mining Zcash and Ethereum. And so at that point in time, like, I became interested in crypto. Like, I was semi-aware of it before then, as this kind of background knows, because I had a history in the payment industry, like before even Bitcoin existed. So I got into it from the mining. So I started mining myself, and then I started day trading it. And by the end of 2017, when that whole bull run had topped, I had amassed this crypto portfolio myself. And I wanted to just park it into a system and then have it be managed. And I was doing all this research, and there was nothing there.
Yeah, there was nothing at the time
there. So, given my own background, I decided to make it, right? So it took a long time. I'll be honest, it took a long time to make it, to get everything right. And
I love this crypto origin story. I think it's pretty unique in the space. People come in because they hear about mining, or somebody drags them in and says, "Hey, man, mine Dogecoin or Litecoin or something." But the NVIDIA, you get put on the task force to figure out why our GPU is flying off the shelf in 2017, and which led right to this mining boom, because Bitcoin is using ASICs, but then there's all these other altcoins at the time that needs to be mined. So, really interesting story there. I like that. Lean into that one. Well, that one's a unique one.
Thanks.
Okay, so I like this use case a lot. Trading crypto assets is certainly available, and in DeFi as well, right? One of the main use cases and earliest use cases for DeFi was decentralized exchanges, which just people want to do swapping tokens. But your contention is that people don't always want to swap and do tokens. They want to do other things with their lives, yet still get potential upside, exposed to risk in crypto. So build something that does it for you. I love this idea. These exist elsewhere right now. Is this like a hedge fund model? Are there AI hedge funds in traditional equities that do a similar sort of thing?
Oh, yeah. So, like the most famous one in equities is Renaissance Technology, right? Which is now primarily all AI, and you can see all their staffing is all these like PhD AI researchers and stuff
Hmm.
like that. That's one of the most, actually, if not the most successful hedge fund in the equity space right now. So, I'm taking that approach, tacking on DeFi on top of it, and
Hmm.
crypto on top of that, right? So, completely decentralized. Anybody can use it. Traditional hedge funds are closed. Like, not only do you have to be an accredited high net worth individual investor to even invest in them, but they have caps and things like that, and like complex holding period requirements. Their fee structure is very antiquated. It's actually very expensive to invest in a hedge fund. So I flipped all that on its head. There's no way for this stuff to be this way. It's just this way by tradition.
Hmm.
I don't think a lot of hedge funds think about like whether this is actually correct, other than just it's the way it is, right?
Yeah.
So,
Well, I mean, I feel like there's in a lot of traditional markets, a lot of traditional business, not just finance, but raise your prices and people will pay if it's a valuable product. And when there's no other products, just raise the prices until it's only available for people who can afford those
mhm,
prices. And if it still earns, then it still can be worthwhile. But that cuts out this vast segment of the population who can't even get close to paying the fees, let alone
yeah.
the caps to the minimums and things like that.
And this
Uh,
gets on our secondary objective as a company. Like we wanted to do this as a humanitarian effort. Like this is both me and Eric's fourth startups, not together, but we
mhm,
individually founded three previous companies. And at this point in the game, like we don't have to prove ourselves. Like we did everything. So we're at this point as entrepreneurs personally, we want to do something good for mankind. So we can do this cat and mouse game where we keep edging the price up, edge it up, edge it up, edge it up, edge it up, and then only the wealthy people can get into it again. And it's like the whole system all over again. It's the same
mhm.
thing all over again, right?
Access as a killer use case.
Mhm.
Right. I mean, that's what it was for email. You start putting terminals in people's houses and you put them in every library and you put them in every school. And all of a sudden, access to email is a killer use case in every workplace. There you go.
Yeah.
Well, why don't we do the same for finance? And why don't we do the same for complex algorithms or, artificial intelligence trained algorithms that maximize yield and make things beneficial? Let's talk a little bit about AI because I want to know. Yeah, see, Maui knows. This is dope. Yeah, this is amazing. This is really cool. Um, uh, we got a bunch of questions in here, which we will get to. We'll keep dropping those nuggets. We'll get to them. We'll talk. What is the AI like? What are the products? How do they kind of work? Let's talk about that a little bit.
So the AI, basically, you need to have a way to analyze so much data so fast that traditional methods just can't. They either are not really designed to do that, or they just can't do it fast enough. Honestly, so we had to design a system using deep learning, and even do novel research in the deep learning field to where we could construct a network that was efficient but complex enough to model all of the inputs and the type of price action that it was seeing happening in markets across over 5,000 markets simultaneously, while at the same time retraining itself in real time and then feeding that back into its system so it could learn from the process, right? Again, that
So,
was like a whole other part to it, right?
so what are some of these inputs? Is it just price? Like you could your the algo looks at BTC to dollar, ETH to dollar, et cetera, on down the list and sees where there's correlations and where to go into stable coins versus into tokens, or is there other things like volatility or volume or things like that? Like what are these kinds of inputs?
I can tell you when I used to be a day trader, like I was talking about, and I years ago used to think that price was everything. Everything was baked into price. That was the master of all inputs, right? What I've realized over time, being in this space for a while now, as well as going through an IDO myself, and that it's really price is a derived metric, and it's really just a sentiment. It's a blockchain. The price is also an input because it's this strange feedback loop where people's sentiment drives the price, but then those people see the price and then it further drives their sentiment, so it's a cycle,
Hmm.
right? It's this cycle that feeds back into itself. It's a feedback loop, right? And all this data kind of is also in the blockchain. That's all related.
Mm.
The social media is related. The news is related. You can reach out to stuff that is farther out, like the bigger markets and events going on, like COVID and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
That's also input, and those are inputs to sentiment, right? So we take a lot of information, and it's not just price. Like we're looking at so many, like it's terabytes and terabytes and terabytes of data that we're looking at all the time.
So one of the questions I have later on was that I'm going to bump up is, is this all on-chain data or is there more? And it sounds like there's a lot more
There's a
that
lot
you're pulling
more.
in.
I mean, some of it is on chain. Like we can take a look at wallets, track their balance over time of various assets, correlate it to price action, determine if they're actually growing their balance over time and how correlated it is to various crypto assets. We know things like that. We know things like what is the total volume of money in the blockchain and where is it going at any one point in time per chain, right? But there's also where was I going with this? There's a lot of data we collect that's just not available. Like you just have to build this system to collect this type of data. It's just you can't buy it even. Things like network traffic and network congestion, exchange lag, like all this type of stuff, right? Is for example, we know when exchanges are getting overwhelmed with like too many orders and things like that, that is actually significant to a market. Things like that.
What are some of the products? The website and the blog mentions a number of sort of products. Are there distinguished products, or is this kind of one parquet and then it does its thing?
So our flagship product is the portfolio management, primarily designed for the retail sector right now. But we're getting a lot of interest from the institutional sector as well. So we're going to layer on a product as well around the institutional side and wealth management side. So that's coming soon. Custodial shit, things like that. There's other cool stuff coming up. I don't really know how much I can talk about it, honestly, yet.
It's okay.
We got a lot of
I won't press you.
coming up too. That is kind of what may surprise you, honestly.
This is a great place to drop teasers, but not, don't reveal actual leaks, because we've got enough people who will watch that they'll stay tuned to you. Sorry, audience. I didn't come to bat for you, did I? I said keep secrets. My bad. Let's get to some questions. We've got some interesting products coming from Flourishing, using these AI models to figure out where to balance funds. Will's got some good questions. I'll start with one. Does the rebalancing function take transaction fees into account?
It does. Yeah, it does.
Okay.
We know the gas rate and all that type of stuff. Yeah. And on centralized exchanges, we know the centralized exchange fees per account, because, some of them will give you discounts based off volume or staking or things like that as well.
So your Flourishing Capital is on BSC, is that correct? But then are you also using centralized exchanges to do some of these other trades?
So we have Faye, the product, which is the name for our portfolio manager AI system. And she currently trades on centralized exchanges, Bittrex and Binance, and we're adding the DEXs soon. The token AI is currently on PancakeSwap and is on BSC.
Gotcha.
So we have to basically make them all marry together, right? So we want to have, the goal here is to get AI in the same platforms of trading and trade on the same, basically all the same across the board. Right?
Cool. Thank you very much. And it does take transaction fees into account. And can we assume the same for decentralized fees, like DEX fees when they come up? Network fees as well. Cool. I got some other cool. Are fees paid like traditional mutual fund or ETF expense ratios? How is Flourishing Capital paid?
So it's different. Like we flipped the whole model on its head. We've found that the traditional model for those fees were unnecessarily expensive for people. So right now we just have two options: straight up subscription billing or staking. Right. And we love you to use staking. That's not live yet. That's coming the next few days. So we're working with one of our partners to directly integrate into a staking system where You're going to get an APY yield with the stake, plus you're going to get platform. Basically, it's going to unlock the actual use of Fei as well with it.
Cool. Zach, you've got a great question. I'm going to save it for a little later, because what we do here is we talk a little bit of nuts and bolts, and then at the end we get a little philosophical, and that's a great philosophical question.
I love it.
You're here because Flourishing Capital has integrated Chainlink price feeds. Can you talk a little bit about what you're using Chainlink to do?
Yeah. So the paramount thing that you want to have when you're analyzing markets is what is the correct price at this point in time. And it looks like a deceptively simple question, but it's actually not. And you know this, right?
I know.
If you take a look at the spot price of any asset, like any crypto, especially the low cap ones are even the worst at this. Mm-hmm. On one exchange it'll be this, on another exchange it'll be something else, another exchange will be something else, and that's not even to say like the OTC trades that are happening and dark pool trades and things like that, right? So it's actually really hard to figure out like what is the correct spot price, the most accurate representation of this asset's price at this point in time. So, and this is why we decided to partner with Chainlink to use their data, because Chainlink's got a great approach to this with their oracles. And this is key to the analysis section. We can't figure out what is the right spot price at any point in time, then the whole analysis becomes biased, right? And that's not what we want.
Or if it's manipulated, that's even worse. Then somebody's taking advantage of the platform and the bots, which means they're taking advantage of all the user funds. And you definitely don't want that.
And exchanges have been known to manipulate price action as well to collect margin liquidations, right? That is the thing. Right? So we have to filter all of that out.
That's the power of decentralization right there. We remove collusion from the possible experience, and as well as getting just better data. I've been thinking about NFTs and floor prices and how, right, that if you have just like one point of comparison, you see an NFT, you own an NFT from a collection, and you see one sell for 30 ETH, and then you look on OpenSea or whatever, and it's you see some listed for 100 ETH, and then you see an offer on yours, and it's for 0.0001 ETH. What's the price of this NFT? You have no idea. Like, you have 3 data points. That's not enough. It's really hard to actually come to an understanding of price. And that's an extremely low liquidity, low volume, super rare set of assets. And so with tokens, it's different, right? There's a different sort of level of supply and different sort of levels of liquidity pools. But the challenge remains the same: is if it's trading at one price over here and different over here, or if it's adjusted in one place, how do you smooth that out? Chainlink uses decentralization and aggregation to solve that in a very coordinated way. So really happy that you guys integrated Chainlink so that I could talk to you and get to know some of this stuff as well. Hold on. What was my other question for you? Okay, so Zach's got an interesting question here about AI and what AI does. Maybe actually this might be a good place to dispel some myths about AI as well. Is people think about AI, and for a long time thought of it as like artificial conscious intelligence. We're not talking about conscious intelligence in this case. What is your AI really doing?
So AI is really, I know this seems like this magic black box to most people, right? It's just a very complicated type of mathematical solver. That's really all an AI is. It's a way to solve problems that are too complex to directly analyze or solve. And so you build this thing called a neural network, and there's a bunch of different ways to construct these things. And so you feed data into it, then it basically becomes different data on the other side. Then you feed it back in again, you feed it back in again. It's like, in a way, kind of like a food processor, right? You're like putting all these ingredients in it, and it's like kind of blending it and processing it, and then it becomes something else on the other side.
So if people are familiar with regression, I don't know, think back to your collegiate statistics. If you did correlation and regression, it's multiple regression. But you can basically have a selector that selects all the inputs that you want to use as predictors for the multiple regression. You run that through your multiple regression, and if it's not significant, you do it a different way. And you do it a different, you reorder them, and you add different ones, and you take some out, and you figure out, well, what's important. And once you figure out what's important, then you take that result and you feed it back into a loop until you kind of make these predictive models that are multi-stage. Now that I hear myself say it, it is complicated. I was thinking like, oh no, it's just a bunch of multiple regressions. So if you know how to do that, it's not that bad. But of course, there's optimization methods and all sorts of things with neural networks that help. But it's really a way of refining a statistical process to get at better predictive results.
Now, there's a whole other field of deep learning around inductive reasoning. And this is how you start getting down the consciousness route of like, well, what is human consciousness? And part of it is our ability to inductively reason. And that's actually very hard to write something that can do that.
Yeah, that's a capital H hard question, mathematically hard. Whatever they're called, N plus P, P plus questions.
NP hard.
Yeah, NPR. Those are the ones. Zach's question is related to this, not the consciousness one, but what happens when everyone's portfolio is being tracked with AI? Can AIs track other AI generated portfolios and like detect patterns and algorithms, or does it turn into a recursive loop that predicts nothing? What happens in this case?
Well, that is to say, is the AI going to get a holistic understanding of the entire market if it ends up capturing most of the market when people using itself, right? The caveat here is that I think, to clarify this, not everybody's portfolio is going to look exactly the same, because everybody has different preferences set up and different objectives and things like that, and has entered the market at different points of time with different amounts of capital and things like that. That's all going to be different. So it's all these different constructed portfolios entering and exiting different coins at different points of time at different prices. So it becomes this kind of level of noise. It's a level of noise that, in theory, Faye could look at holistically, saying, well, this level of noise is my level of noise and I do something with it. But that's not something that we actively track right now or want to dig into, honestly. I feel like that's a little bit of Pandora's box, honestly.
Zach, I compare this to self-driving cars. If absolutely every vehicle on the road were self-driving cars, would it be perfectly orderly? If every stoplight and every intersection was tuned for this, it might be perfectly orderly and there would be no accidents. But really, that's not how roads work. Deer jump in the road, boulders fall, there's erosion. Like, somebody's got to drive an emergency vehicle to somewhere, and it's got to be fast. Like, error happens. It's just a part of life, and there's no way to remove error from systems. It's entropy, right? It's a fundamental principle of nature. So those AIs, even if they're mostly working with each other and predicting based on other AIs, there's always error in the system, which leads to some really amazing outcomes. And I did see that you asked that question. I just wanted to get there my own way. So really fantastic question. I appreciate it very much. Other thoughts, Will? I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's it. I think that if Faye does end up capturing a large portion of the market ultimately, it would, in my opinion, reduce the total volatility of the market and trend it upward. And that's just speculation right now. That's like theoretical. Like, we would have to see that actually happen, honestly. But that ultimately would be beneficial for the market, because then it would allow people to kind of not have a heart attack when they're looking at their assets in general, right?
Protocols tend to be DeFi protocols tend to be profit maximalist, and which they trend towards that. Anyways, great discussion, awesome questions. I want to find out, Will, kind of what's coming up next for Flourishing on the roadmap. So we can know what's next. And we are going to start wrapping this up because we're coming up on time. So I'm going to encourage everybody to join the Flourishing channels after this. But first, let me hear what's coming up on the roadmap.
Yeah, well, first, you can always go to flourishingcapital.io, and we have a roadmap on our site. And it has a lot of cool stuff coming up. In the very near future, we want to make sure that we get the exchange listings lined up with the system that we're trading on. So that's going to allow basically all of these things to kind of work together, right? And we have staking coming up as well, which will tie into the whole ecosystem. So you'll be able to stake with Faye. Faye will be able to trade AI, which is an interesting kind of thought experiment in itself, right? And it'll, AI will be on the exchanges that we trade and all that type of stuff. So we're sorting through all this stuff in the near future. And then beyond that, we're adding the custodialship, as well as the institutional branch and all that type of stuff as well.
So you're like, hey, Andy, we just launched a week ago. Chill out.
Yeah,
Sorry,
pretty
dude.
much. Right?
I gotta.
It's
No,
stressful. IDOs are stressful.
I'm really glad you came on. I appreciate your time, and we're looking forward to everything you guys are doing down the road. I see more questions in the chat, so I don't have time for those. I'm going to send you to Flourishing Capital, Telegram, Discord, Twitter, website. All that stuff is down in the description below. Join communities, be an active member in those communities. You can learn and find out valuable insight as well. Will, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate you coming on, man.
Thank you. Thanks, Andy. I appreciate having me.
I'll talk to you later.
All right. Peace.
All right, everybody. Great talking to Will there, learning about AI algorithms. Thank you for the amazing questions from a couple of you. Really appreciate you guys coming on and using your brains, thinking about interesting things, applying them to finance, and sticking with us. Join those Flourishing Capital communities and join the Chainlink communities as well. Telegrams, Discords. The fall hackathon is coming up for Chainlink. Do not miss this. If you've got any dev skills whatsoever, they need front-end devs. They need project managers. They need help, bug squashers. So join teams and be a part of that. You can Google Chainlink Hackathon. It'll come up. It's not hard to find. Like and subscribe to this YouTube channel. We do these AMAs a couple of times a week. I got another one coming up on Thursday with 88 miles per hour, I think at 1 p.m. Eastern. So come and visit me there. We talk to tons of cool DeFi, NFT, gaming, blockchain teams across the space, anybody who's integrated with Chainlink. And I appreciate your tweets and checking me out and hanging out with me. All right, guys, that's it for me. Come back. I will see you on Thursday on the next Chainlink Live.